I'll kick things off. I'll
Okay.
just do a little introduction. Hey, everybody out there. My name is Chris. This is Chee-Tash, and today we have another very special guest on the podcast, Mr. Ray Blehar. And I knew of Ray from an interview that he did from the Ed Opperman Report, which is another great podcast. And Ray, would you please introduce yourself for the audience?
Well, Chris, thanks for having me on. Uh, let's see. Ray Blehar. I retired from the federal government in 2017 after spending 32 years as an analyst. Most of the time as an analyst. A few years I was a assistant inspector general. So basically, analysis and investigations are what I do, or what I did. Um, my connection to Penn State was I grew up about 50 miles from there. I got my MBA from Penn State in 2008. Um, my undergraduate degree is from a little school in Pennsylvania called Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And that degree was geography, which is how I kind of got into the defense and intelligence work. So that's my professional background in a nutshell. I
Nice.
got involved with a scandal at Penn State because, like many people, I waited for the report from Louis Freeh to come out and find out what happened. And then, as a person who writes this type of reports and as a fellow investigator, I said, this is one of the worst reports I've ever read. The executive summary has a lot of information in it that's not supported in the body of the report. So, when the report was hastily done and really just a bad job. So, pretty much a bunch of us tore the report apart, and then we just kept going from there. As things developed, we just stayed on top of it. So that's kind of how I got to where I am right now.
And thank you for mentioning that, Ray. That's the topics of the interviews that I saw that you did with Ed Opperman were regarding Second Mile, Jerry Sandusky, and Penn State, and it's something that kind of hits close to home for me as well. And I went to University of Michigan, so being in Big Ten schools, and we play Penn State every year in a variety of sports. I was in school when this scandal happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wanted to ask you, and it's funny because this is a question. I interviewed a Civil War professor, and I had mentioned to him that even today, that there are still there's still books being written about the Civil War. And I asked him, like, is there still stuff that needs to be said about the Civil War? And he said, yeah, absolutely, yes. And I guess I wanted to start off and ask you kind of a similar question. And I know you mentioned that you have a book coming out on this topic, and I wanted to kind of ask you what more like needs to be said or needs to be heard about Jerry Sandusky, Second Mile, and this whole scandal.
A lot, because what the media did was they followed the lead of the prosecutors, the attorney general's office. And when they weren't doing that, they were following the lead of Louis Freeh. So anything that didn't fit with their narrative of a Penn State cover up just was whitewash. So when you go back and you look at the investigation of Jerry Sandusky and then subsequently the investigation of the Penn State administrators, president, and those people, there's a lot of information that the public doesn't know because the media ignored it because it didn't fit with the narrative of the Penn State cover up. For example, probably the best example, Louis Freeh allegedly found this secret file belonging to the vice president of finance, Gary Schultz, that Schultz had kept away. Well, fact of the matter was, he didn't find it. Louis Freeh, when they went to court in a preliminary hearing, nobody from Louis Freeh's team testified to finding the file. So completely false, completely made up. Uh, they, the investigator that took the stand could not even say when the file was discovered. Okay. He didn't know. And so eventually documents became available. Notes from Louis Freeh's investigative team were leaked to the public. And one of the investigators admitted that they were handed the information from the attorney general, uh, who had it probably in January of 2011. And they alleged that this information was kept hidden until April of that year. So all false. Yeah.
Hmm. Really quick, Louis Freeh he was a former FBI director, correct?
Yeah.
And he was FBI director under Bill Clinton. Is that correct?
I believe he was. Yeah, I believe may have been in the Bush administration as well. But I think Mueller took his place.
Okay. And how does how does he get linked to write this report? Like, could anybody have written this report, or was he somehow?
Well, he was hired by the board of trustees as the special investigator,
Oh, okay.
and so they actually had considered uh, a few other people, but the governor of Pennsylvania had recommended Free, and he was uh, he was picked because of his alleged reputation, which kind of went into tatters after Penn State. But that's another story.
Going back, kind of to like square one with this guy Jerry Sandusky. Can you tell us just a little bit about like who was Jerry Sandusky?
Yeah. So Jerry grew up in a little town called Washington, Pennsylvania, kind of little city. Anyway, his father owned a uh, kind of like a recreation center for boys, and so they lived above the rec center. And so that's where Jerry Sandusky first learned his trade, showering with boys at the rec center and wrestling around with them. And then he went on to, said he never dated anyone. He never dated girls in high school, never dated girls in college. Um, became a uh, became a football coach, assistant football coach at Penn State. Actually, he started at Juniata College, which is a little college in Huntington, Pennsylvania. Then he got a job at Boston College, and then he was eventually hired at Penn State. And so when he got to Penn State, I want to say that was around 75, maybe 74. It was about 3 years after he got there that he established the children's charity called the Second Mile. And then, so between 77 and up until 2010, when they fired him from the Second Mile, that's what he ran. He coached football and he did the Second Mile. So very, very what they call pillar of a community child molester. So trusted by everyone, goofy guy, wouldn't harm anyone, but nope, sinister.
In regarding his career in football, he was also a player at Penn State as well?
Yes, he played at Penn State. I think he was a tight end. Uh, you know, not a significant career there by any means,
Hmm.
but yeah, he played there.
Would you say I don't remember I don't remember Jerry Sandusky as a coach, and I know he retired in, was it like 1998 or 1999, something like that?
He retired in '98, and then they rehired him for the '99 season as a consultant, and
Okay.
then they kind of fired him after the '99 season.
It
So, but he had built this reputation um, as a linebacker coach, and he was a very good position linebacker coach. He was not a great defensive coordinator, though people thought he was, because he had a couple of great games that the defense stood out when they beat Miami in the Fiesta Bowl. But most of the time, I mean, he had a lot of talent. They recruited great at Penn State and great athletes. So the defenses were always pretty good when he was there.
Yeah, I had heard the name linebacker U.
Right.
I remember that name growing up, associated with Penn State, and yeah, I remember lots of great players coming out of Penn State. Lots of great defensive players. Um, when Jerry retired after 1998, 1999, that you had mentioned, um, at that time, did people know about what was going on with Jerry and children and the second mile?
You mean like the sexual part?
Yes.
No, no, that's, of course not. That would be crazy, um, because uh, you know it just looked normal. Um, he'd have 5 kids with him all the time. So maybe he's you know got a group of 5 kids and he's molesting one of the 5.
Hmm.
Okay, and so it was very normal to see him around kids, and um, so yeah, that's one of the fallacies of any of these cases that you run into. Larry Nasser, or, the guy at Michigan, the coach. Like I said, once we started the fad, everybody got in on it. Michigan State, Ohio State. You know, so you start finding out this happens everywhere, not just
Hmm.
not just Pennsylvania or Penn State. So like I said, they're serial criminals. Serial criminals can only be serial criminals if they're good at hiding what they do. You know, if they weren't good at it, they would get arrested and they'd only harm 1 or 2 people. So Ted Bundy, John Gacy,
Hmm.
all those serial killers are really good at blending in, not standing out, hiding what they do.
And so when I had remember, I remember when Mike McQueary came out with his statements about what he had allegedly seen in the Penn State locker room that one day. Is that kind of like the thing that kind of sparked this whole thing? Was that like where everything started from? Was from what Mike McQueary allegedly saw?
Well, the media firestorm was caused by the attorney general lying about what Mike McQueary said he saw. Okay. But no, in the investigation of Jerry, there were 2. Okay. The first one was in 1998, and a mother complained because his her son was showered with Jerry. Okay. So when they talked to her, she said, well, the neighbor kid also showered with Jerry. So they interviewed Jerry, and Jerry goes, well, I've done it with a bunch of other kids too. And the Child Protective Services people said, well, if there was no sexual intent, it's not a crime. It's nothing wrong. So they didn't do anything about Jerry. And the cops, certainly, if child welfare is saying there's nothing sexual, cops, district attorney really can't press charges, because who they're going to call as a defense witness? Child Protective Services. They're going to say it's normal for this 50-year-old guy or 60-year-old guy to be showering with kids. Okay, so that case wasn't going anywhere. And then in 2008, another kid came forward, and like I said, you know, he did this in Clinton County, Pennsylvania, where they weren't wise to Jerry, and so they basically said, "Yeah, well, in this case, he didn't shower with him; he was actually in bed with him." And so um, they said, "Yeah, Jerry's a child molester." So they said, "We'll let the cops come in and investigate, but for now, Jerry can't go anywhere near this kid." And so then about that was like November the 20th or the 21st, this of 2008, that happened. And then Jerry showed up with his attorney on January the 12th. to be interviewed by Child Protective Services. And at that meeting, he admitted, yeah, I was in bed with this kid, rolled around, had him on top of me. I was on top of him. I blew raspberries on his stomach. But they asked him if he put his hands below the waist. He said he couldn't remember. And so, he pretty much admitted, if you're accused of having sex with a minor, and then you admit, yeah, I was in bed with him, but nothing happened. Well, that story doesn't going to hold up. Didn't hold up in court. So anyway, so that's how
Wow.
it started. And then basically they mucked around with it. Cops didn't show up to investigate for 3 weeks, right, after the initial report. Then when they did show up, they made every effort they could not to find victims. And then they eventually kicked it to the attorney general, who did the same thing for 2 years, did everything they could not to find victims, until Mike McQueary popped up. But Mike McQueary only popped up because there was an anonymous tip from some political operative who, once Corbett was elected governor, next day, tip goes into the Center County DA's office about Mike McQueary seeing this thing in the shower. And then the investigation picks up from there because the governor wanted to get the president of Penn State removed. So he's like, I could use this to remove the Penn State president. This is great. So that's, had he not had this tiff with the president of Penn State, Jerry'd probably be out walking around today.
Wow. Um, speaking of Mike McQueary, I this is a part that I always kind of confused me because it seemed, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, because my memory's not great on this event. It seemed like he was so sure of what he saw at one point, and then all of a sudden he wasn't as sure like later on down the line. Is that kind of accurate?
Well, his story changed pretty dramatically. Actually, I have the notes from the president who took over after Spanier, Rod Erickson, left his notebook laying in a room, and some kid picked it up, who happened to be in some secret society, and he handed me a copy of the notebook. And in the notebook, it says, back in 2001, when McQueary saw this, he gave a very benign description of what he saw. And then 10 years later, he gave this more vivid description. But even so, in 2010, when he talked to the cops, he changed his story. Because first he said he was on campus working late, and then he went over to the Lash building and he saw this incident in the shower room. And then, for whatever reason, later on, he changed his story and said he was at his house and he was sleeping, watching Rudy, the Notre Dame movie. And he, like, this was like 5:30 at night or something. He's in bed watching this movie. And then he gets up and goes to the locker room to put a pair of shoes back. And you know, and then he sees this thing. But his story is, he tells the police he doesn't know what the kid looks like. He couldn't be able to identify the kid. The kid's between 10 and 14. Well, between 10 and 14, kids can, yeah, and that's a time during a growth spurt. If you're 10, you're a little kid, and you're 14 and you're 6 foot, or you're 5'8", or whatever. And it just so happened that he looked into the shower through a mirror, okay, from his locker. And Jerry and this kid happened to be standing in the only place in the entire locker room that you could be seen through that mirror. But every other kid who testified said they're at the opposite end where you can't see through the mirror. Now, serial criminals are pattern behavior. They don't change. They go to that end of the shower because if somebody walks in, they can't see him. Okay, it's that simple. So this one time, Jerry's down at the other end. No, don't think so. Okay, so then Mike, when the story came out, Mike was kind of humiliated and embarrassed because people read it and said, well, why didn't he go in there and stop this, rape from occurring. Okay. And so Mike's like, oh, yeah, geez. When I changed my story, I didn't think of that angle coming out. So then he called the attorney general's office and emailed her, which we have the emails. He says, well, I really didn't actually see that going on. I just, think that's what was going on. So not a reliable witness whatsoever, you know. And through all the trials, nobody really did a good job impeaching his story for whatever reason. They just, I know in Spaniard's trial, they had watched the civil case between McQuarrie and Penn State. The jury felt bad for Mike for whatever reason because of all the threats he got. And so they didn't cross-examine him hardly at all during the Spaniard trial, which they should have totally annihilated. Like said, here's your 4 different versions. How could you go from being working late on campus to this version where you're home in bed? Then you say you drove across campus and it was deserted, but there was a rock concert going on at the basketball arena where there would be police out directing traffic to tell people which way to go. So if you didn't remember any of that, you must have been out of your mind drunk, or it didn't happen the way you said it happened. So,
and really,
out of his mind drunk, knowing Mike McQuarrie.
I actually I was just going to bring that up, just for audience or people who don't know, who was Mike McQuarrie? He was a former player at Penn State, right?
He played quarterback at Penn State from 90. He was a starter in 1997. He only played 1 year as a starter. But then he came back as a GA, graduate assistant coach. And so that's what he was doing there in 2001, right there. So he was quite, he liked the bar scene in State College. He could tip a few drinks. And, I suspect, the week that this happened was the end of, he was really helping with recruiting when he was the GA. Okay. So that was letter of intent week. All right. So what would you do at the end of letter of intent week on a Friday when you don't have any classes in graduate school? You'd be downtown drinking, right? Every grad student would. All right. Unless you're off on spring break, which Mike wasn't. So chances are he was drinking downtown. He walked across the street from the bar where there's a sporting goods store. Okay. Bought shoes at the sporting goods store, drove to campus drunk, put him in his locker, went into the locker room, heard some noises, saw Sandusky and the kid come out of the shower, and then he drove home. Okay. That's probably what happened.
Wow. And was it like the next subsequent events that happen, he ends up going to the head coach, Joe Paterno, correct? And he has a conversation with him at his house.
Right.
And is in that conversation.
Well, let's just start now. This is what happened next. So Mike saw something that troubled him. So he called his dad to find out what to do. Okay. Then his dad worked at a medical practice as an administrator, and they called one of the doctors from the practice over to see what Mike should do. So we have 2 people talking about what Mike should do, and neither of them say call the police. Now, if you think you witnessed a rape and you told 2 grown adult men, one's in his 40s or one's in his 60s, they would obviously advise to call the police, unless Mike McQuarrie was too drunk to talk to the police. Then Mike, go home and sleep it off. And then tomorrow, go tell Joe what you saw.
Wow. And in that, do we know in that conversation that he had with Joe Paterno, do we know exactly what he described to Joe?
Mike admits under oath that he did not give Joe any specifics about what he saw. And the meeting lasted all of 5 minutes. Okay. Mike came in, sat at the kitchen table. Joe came in, sat down. Mike said he saw some kind of thing, in there that bothered him about Jerry. Okay. And so Joe said, "Don't worry about it, Mike. I'll take care of it." You know. And so that was that. Really, and like I said, under oath, he said he never used any term like sodomy, sex, anal sex, any of that kind of stuff with Joe.
In just like speculating, do you think he did that because he knows that Jerry Sandusky's been a coach under Joe Paterno for many, many years. He doesn't want to um he wants to kind of give him some sort of, I don't want to say respect, but I I don't know if that makes sense, but he just didn't want.
I think that Mike is telling Joe the truth because he didn't see anything. Okay. He, there was something going on, forcing around, or noises coming out of the locker room. Like he said to the doctor, I heard what I thought were sex sounds.
Mm.
Okay. Turns out the kid that Jerry had a habit of slap boxing these kids when they were in the shower and wrestling around with them. So, you can grab them and then rope them and stuff. So he probably just heard them slapping each other and doing that kind of thing. And, he interpreted it to be, sex noises. Okay. Dr. Dranoff, one of the doctors, said, "Well, Mike, what did you see?" And Mike would never tell him what he saw. So it was like, look, what's so hard? If he saw something, tell him what he saw. But the point is, Jerry was at the end of the shower where you couldn't see anything. So Mike heard noise, saw Jerry and the kid come out. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
that's, if I had to, on my dying grave, I would say that's exactly what happened. Couldn't have been anything else. So Mike's trying to say to Joe, look, something happened. I don't know what it was. Joe says, okay, I'll check it out. I'll go tell Curly, the athletic director, what happened. So, and Joe, like, he was flying out to Pittsburgh right after he got done talking to Mike. He had to go to a dinner. So again, this isn't 5 alarm fire, call the cops. This is something happened. We don't know what it was. Joe got back from Pittsburgh, looked up what he was supposed to do in the manual for Penn State. Says, okay, tell my boss what I saw, And Joe was like, that's that. Let him handle it.
Do you think, did people use this meeting between Mike and Joe against Joe to say that, oh, see, like Paterno was told what was going on?
Yeah. Read the grand jury presentment. Okay. It's what I call accurate but misleading, because in one sentence it says Mike looked into the shower room and saw Jerry having sexual intercourse with a young boy from 10 to 12 years old. Okay. Next sentence. Then he went to Joe Paterno's house and told him what he saw. Okay. Which you make the inference, well, that's what he told him. But that's not really what happened. Those two sentences, like I say, they're both accurate, but when you put them together, that's not accurate. Each sentence on their own. So when you read it, I would say to anybody, if you read a grand jury presentment or an indictment, each sentence doesn't have to connect to the next sentence. Okay. Each one of those sentences is a statement of fact that may not actually be true in the context of the next sentence.
I see what you're saying.
I've read numerous indictments and I go through and it's like, okay, these two sentences they're true, but they don't go together. They have nothing to do with what happened or what the allegation, what the crime that you're charging with. If you put those two sentences together, yeah, you have that. But that's really not isn't what happened. Okay.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And again, this meeting between Mike and Joe took place in 2001, you said?
Yeah, that Saturday after Mike allegedly saw this on Friday night, went to Joe's Saturday.
Okay. And then looking at Joe and, like you said, the actions that he took, he he goes, he has that meeting with Mike, and then he goes to his superiors, which were, you had mentioned, like the president of the university,
No,
or
he just went to his supervisor, the athletic director. He actually called him on the phone and just said, "Hey, Tim, come on over to the house," which is how Joe worked everything.
Mhm.
I mean, it didn't have to be a major event to get invited to Joe's house to talk. Joe didn't spend any much time in the football office, like in his office. He had an office at home. Okay. I mean, when he met with the staff, he met at, you know, Lash building, but he had, projector, he had everything he needed in his home office. Um, so when they built a new stadium, of course, they built this gigantic, grandiose office for him because it's really for the next coach. But Joe operated out of his house as much as he could.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, it wasn't a big deal getting called over to Joe's house. So, Joe and his wife were always talking to people.
Okay. Yeah, he like his house was just right there on campus, right in State College.
Oh yeah, it's right just off campus.
Yeah.
I mean, you cross Park Avenue, which is north of the stadium, in a little neighborhood called Park Forest. And that's where Joe lived. He could walk 15 minutes to get to the stadium.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool that he was very um accessible to, the university and students,
Mhm.
athletes. Yeah. Um Now moving forward, some years to when this scandal like really breaks out, is
Right,
this is 2011 when now Jerry Sandusky gets arrested. Is that right?
exactly. November of 2011, November 9th
Okay.
was, well, November 9th was the night that they had the press conference and fired Joe. Sandusky got, let's see, the grand jury report was released Saturday, November 5th. The charges against Jerry were leaked on the 4th, on Friday the 4th. And so word got out Friday night, but just the charges, like just the legal dockets, criminal docket sheets, no details, not the 36 pages of, you know, describing the crimes or anything like that. That didn't come out till Saturday morning. And then on Saturday, people read it and started, getting fired up about it. And by Monday, when they had the press conference, then, things were in full fury because Weekend Talk Radio and everybody else were all over this story about Joe not reporting this crime to the police.
And is this right around the time? Uh, if my and I don't know if you know this, my if my memory serves me correctly, Joe had just eclipsed the like all-time winningest head.
Right, exactly. I think it was, yeah, the weekend they played Illinois, and yeah, he went to the 409th win. Then they had an off week,
Mhm.
right? And so all this stuff happened during the off week.
So I just like going through it in my head. I can't. I just don't know what that emotional roller coaster is like to go from, you're the all-time winningest, head football coach in college football to, I mean, it was like a week later and they're firing him.
Yeah, yeah. So Joe, if you read Poznansky's book uh, about Joe, he kind of thought this wasn't a big deal. Like it was going to blow over. He was getting ready to prep to coach the next game against Nebraska. Okay. Um, but they were saying, Joe, no, this is really a major thing. The media's all over it. And then when they canceled like his Tuesday morning press conference, where you know he would get up there and say whatever, okay, they basically the board of trustees took it away from Paterno. Like I said, there was a power triangle at Penn State. There was President Spanier, there was Joe Paterno, and there was the board of trustees. Now Joe didn't have any real power, but he'd been there for 60 years. Okay. raised all this money for the university. So he was very well respected. You know, he would go in and work with the board on different projects, build libraries, do whatever. Um, so the board wanted to consolidate power. So the way to do that is fire Spanier, fire Paterno. Okay. Then take over and we'll run the university without interference from these other guys the way we think the university should be run. So that was part of it. The board wanted to, you know, consolidate power. There's also a personal vendetta by one of the people on the board against Joe. So then you had the governor, who's an ex officio member of the board, who had a vendetta against Graham Spann. So that's kind of what happened. All the vendettas got settled. You know, everything's fine now. The politicos got what they needed, power broker got what they needed. So,
Do you think, like the fact that Joe Paterno's been coaching at Penn State at that point since like the '60s, was there some, I don't know if animosity is the right word, but were people kind of getting like in that at that level of the administration of the university and such? Were they getting kind of tired of Paterno and they were kind of seeing this as like their way out?
well, so here's the other thing too. I mean, so Spanier, that was going to be Joe's last year. Okay, Spanier had already told four four people on the board of trustees, and they had to keep it a secret that Joe was going to retire at the end of the year because Joe didn't want a retirement tour through all the Big Ten stadiums. He just wanted to go quietly and leave, and didn't want any speculation about his successor going on. And so they all knew he was leaving at the end of the year. So there was no reason to fire him like that, but they just did it out of vindictiveness. All right. So, and I think, the media causing the firestorm that they did, the board felt pressure to act, but, it was kind of a, how should I say it? Um, yeah, just basically vindictiveness more than anything. They wanted to disgrace him before he left.
Okay. And now Joe Paterno, within what is it? Within like just a few months of his firing, he passes away. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. So he had lung cancer, and I don't know when it was diagnosed, but you know, yeah. So by January,
Wow.
he was, and looked really, just he. I don't know what chemotherapy or whatever they tried. You know, he was very gaunt when he died, but you know, it's just
Yeah.
it's crazy how it happened. You know, and I think him not being around to defend himself later, like the Free Report. If Joe's alive, I don't think the Free Report's anywhere near as brutal. But with him dead, he can't he can't argue. He can't have his own press conference, which is what they would have wanted to hear. Joe would have said that report's a bunch of malarkey. You know, Joe out of the way. You had a bunch of weenies from our board coming up there and saying the report's great, thorough, comprehensive. You know, and before anybody's even read it. Okay, because if the story was supposed to come out, the media was supposed to get a copy. They said there was a glitch. They couldn't post it on the web. They could post the executive summary or hand out executive summaries, which was all the bad stuff, but nothing to support it in the body of the report. Then they came out and tried to hand out thumb drives to the media. So it was a circus. But yeah, when you read the report, it's like, oh my God, there's just nothing there, you know.
And was the Free Report uh, the reason why then that later on the NCAA took away like a lot of wins from Joe Paterno?
Well, that's kind of that in a nutshell, that's how you could interpret it. But um, so the story goes, the NCAA sanction story that's probably not told, which probably could be a whole nother book, is there were two parallel things going on. Okay. You had Mark Emmert, the head of the NCAA, and you had Don Remy, the general counsel for the NCAA, working with president of Penn State, Rod Erickson, and his attorney. Okay. His name escapes me. He was hired on. But anyway, they basically hammered out the whole thing. Okay. Consent decree, the punishment, blah, blah, blah. All done on this executive level. Meanwhile, the guy that Penn State hired to negotiate with the investigative staff, a guy named Gene Marsh, I don't know if you ever heard of him. Okay. But wherever Gene Marsh has been hired, like Ohio State hired him, Alabama hired him, I don't know who else hired him, but whoever they've hired him, they got severely punished. Okay. Because he's such a bad negotiator. Okay. So he worked with the NCAA investigators, and then he would come back and he would tell the board of trustees, oh, this is terrible. This is awful. Bow down. Give them whatever they want. They're going to give you the death penalty, which was all, that's a big lie. Death penalty was never on the table, really. Okay. And so basically, they hammered it out with the NCAA and, top guy Emmert, our top guy Erickson, and his attorneys. Frank Guadagnino was the attorney's name at Penn State. But anyway, they came up with the consent decree and the sanctions and made sure we stayed on television, But they really wanted to, as an academic, President Rod Erickson really wanted football to, take a back seat to academics. I mean, he had this fantasy, like, we're going to make football like just, like an Ivy League football thing, we're going to be like Harvard and these guys where we're known for academics and the football team's there. It was like, okay, that's not realistic. That every major university that people want to go to, they got a good football team on TV, and they got a good basketball team on TV. Like you talk to somebody who goes to somewhere like East Carolina, they're like, oh, we wish we were like Penn State, and so that's how these universities are. That's where the power is. But you had these knuckleheads like Rod Erickson who thought we're going to do this academically. Well, we're going to be the Harvard of Pennsylvania. So, sorry, we already have Penn. Okay, that's the Ivy League school in Pennsylvania. You're not going to be Penn. Forget about it. So,
okay.
So the NCAA, that was all just a big show. Another, I could say, was a farce. And then when they really pushed Don Remy, who was the general counsel for the NCAA, and they pushed Mark Emmert about the free report, they said, well, we never accepted it. We accepted it because Penn State accepted it. We didn't read it. We didn't analyze it. Penn State did that. They're the ones who said it was okay. And then you talk to Penn State, they're like, no, nobody read it. It's like doing the executive board of the NCAA, Penn State Board of Trustees. You could probably find 3 people who actually read the entire report. The rest of them, they're executives. They read the executive summary. And they say, oh, okay, then that's what happened because the report must be supported. The rest of the report supports this, but it didn't.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, those wins that the NCAA took away, eventually they did get back. They returned them back to Joe Paterno, right? Mm-hmm. They returned pretty much all the ones that they took away. They gave back all of them.
They were sued. NCAA got sued by the senator from Pennsylvania and the treasurer from Pennsylvania. And in the negotiation of the lawsuit, they gave the wins back. But they still fined us $60 million, which is another great story. Probably a lot of people don't know that the $60 million fine to the athletic department was paid through a university loan. University loaned, the university's worth like $5 billion. Okay. They loaned the football team $60 million. with interest. So over the course of the loan, the university makes $43 million of interest on the NCAA fines that they pay. How's that sound? Nice place, huh?
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, Pivoting back to Jerry Sandusky, uh,
Uh-huh.
and when he was first arrested, uh, what were the charges that they hit him with?
Well, yeah. So when he was arrested, they hit him with 48 to 50 charges, ranging from involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, which was for him oral sex. Okay, between him giving it and getting it. A couple charges of rape, maybe one attempted rape. Uh, Most of the other charges were fondling and which is called indecent assault, and then some minor charges like contributing to the delinquency of a minor, child endangerment. Uh, so there's a lot of lesser charges, and maybe like 5 to 10 IDSI charges. So,
Okay.
but anyway, none of of course, the rape in the locker room that caused the firestorm, he was found not guilty. Okay. Um, so yeah, that's good. He also, the other great thing about the attorney general is the stuff that they charged Tim Curley and Gary Schultz with. Those charges were eventually dismissed. So the stuff that caused the firestorm never prosecuted. Okay.
Wow.
So Spanier, when they charged him with the same stuff, thrown out. Okay. So so Jerry got convicted on, was it 45 out of 48 counts. There's only three that didn't get charged. The McQuarrie rape scene, because McQuarrie didn't see it. He even told the jury he didn't see it. Second charge was a groping charge where a kid alleged that Jerry groped him in the shower. And for some reason, the jury didn't believe this kid. Okay. Uh, I just don't think the kids didn't really fit the pattern of Jerry, the way Jerry did things. Because like normally you take a kid in the shower, and that was kind of a test. You do that early on. This kid said, well, it was 3 years before Jerry took him to the shower. It was probably, the jury kind of said, nah, it doesn't fit. So, and then the third one was another groping allegation that the victim, the witness, went on the stand and said, no, Jerry never groped me. They just, the attorney general just charged on it. And even the witness said, no, it didn't happen. So,
Now, I've seen some stuff as of recently that Jerry's like kind of back in the news. He's asking for like a new trial. Is that right?
right. Yeah, I think they actually denied that already.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he was citing new evidence that these kids underwent memory therapy. Okay, which they didn't. Okay, hate to say it, but as much as they want to say it happened, it didn't happen. One of the kids who did undergo it wasn't in a trial, so it doesn't count. Okay, he's trying to get a new trial. It has to be something that happened at his trial. Um, what else were they trying to say happened? Most of the stuff that they brought up was already brought up at previous trials, previous appeals. So it got kicked out fast. And I kind of told people,
Mhm.
I didn't even write about it. I said, this is all, you may think it's new, but it's all been appealed before. So,
Okay. And I know you had mentioned Graham Spanier, and I know that I actually have his book in the Lion's Den right here. I was just curious, have you read his book?
oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm in it about 30 times.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, wow. I picked it up. I actually I haven't quite gotten to it yet. um,
I'm referenced in there quite a bit.
is does do you think what do you think about Graham's book? Does it do like a good job of speaking about this, like the media firestorm, like that you
Yeah, I
talked
think
about?
he does a really good job explaining like he's looking at it from his angle. Like he wanted to how he wanted to handle the press, and they wouldn't let him. Uh, he didn't go into any detail about what the press lied about. Okay, um, but he does a good job of his perspective of what happened, and then he does really goes into the criminal justice system about how that um, just was turned on his head to it took him 6 years to get to trial. And when he got there, he gets convicted of child endangerment. Okay, there's 2 counts of child endangerment where the wording was exactly the same. Okay, they acquit him on one, and they convict him on the other. Same kid. Okay, right. Um,
Wow.
and then a conspiracy to commit child endangerment, which they acquitted him of that. So the jury basically they gave the case to the jury on a Friday. They wanted to go home for the weekend. They had one holdout who at the end decided, all right, I'll vote guilty just to get out of here, you know. And so Spanier goes to jail for 3.5 months, over a jury who the guy even went to the judge and said, Judge, I got to tell you, I didn't think he was guilty. I just went along with him. Okay. I didn't see the crime. And the judge should have said, look, the judge should have said, look, jury, you can't convict him on this one and then quit him on the other. Either he's guilty of both, but it can't be just one. Okay. It's the same crime. Okay. But the judge didn't do it. The judge was kind of crooked. And then Spanier, he had it overturned. Okay. Appeal was overturned. They overturned the conviction. The attorney general kicked it to the Supreme Court. And one of these guys on the Supreme Court, who used to be an attorney general, who probably had something to do with Jerry walking away from his crimes in 1998, said Spanier was guilty of supervising. He had to endanger the welfare of a child. You have to supervise the child, okay, or have some responsibility officially, okay. And this judge wrote, because Spanier sent an email to Curley and Schultz about what we're going to do about Jerry, okay, he then assumed responsibility for the child, which they didn't even know who the child was. They didn't even know it was a child. Okay, they had no idea how old this kid was. Okay, and even in the appeal, Spanier's appeal said, we don't know who the kid is. McQuarrie's saying it could be 10, it could be 14. Okay, if he's over 14, this certain crime doesn't apply. All right. So, but the judge wouldn't let that part of the appeal go forward. So, yeah, just very very corrupt. And it was a sideshow. It was like put all this stuff on Penn State. Meanwhile, don't do anything to the second mile. And that's really where my book really was focusing on how badly they avoided going to the second mile. Like if you're searching for victims in a police investigation, the first kid says, I met Jerry through the second mile. Second person they interview is the kid's coach. And while they interview the mom, she says, yeah, met him through the second mile. They interview the football coach. He says, yeah, Jerry's got 4 kids here that he mentors through this charity called the Second Mile. Okay. And then another guy that they run into who sees Jerry in the wrestling room with the kid says, well, I know Jerry does all this work for the community through the Second Mile. So you got 6, 7 people all telling the cops, there's this place called Second Mile that Jerry runs for young boys. And, that's where he's meeting these kids, befriending them. So you would think, boy, police maybe ought to go down there, Second Mile, find out if there's any more kids who have a story like this. Never did it. Never went, not until 2011, 2 years before they went to talk to anybody from the Second Mile.
And what could be the reason for that? And I know if you don't want to give too much away from your book, totally understand. But
well, usually they say follow the money in these cases, which is in this case is partially true. Um, I have an MBA, my friends that are PhD accounting professors. We went through the books of Second Mile. Lots of money missing, between 10 and 25 million. Okay, missing over the period from 98 to 2010, right? Um, so we have missing money, but we have very wealthy people who are on the board of the Second Mile. They don't need money, okay? So then if they're not embezzling the money, the people at Second Mile don't get paid anything. Where do you think the money's going?
Um, like maybe even higher than that. Uh, like
How about the silence victims?
okay, huh? Wow. Phew. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, yeah. Neither did anybody else.
Yeah.
But, so we're looking at their books. Um, at one point, the Second Mile used to disclose in their financial statements the children who they gave grants to, grant money, 5,000, 2,000, 1,000. Okay. After 2002, they stopped doing that. Okay. And then you have a situation where you have kids saying, well, this person from Second Mile gave me a car. Okay. Or gave me money to buy a car. Or gave me a pickup truck. Okay. And then the Second Mile would hold what was called a reverse auction. Okay. So at the end of the night, a needy Second Mile family would be awarded a house. Okay. Second Mile board was full of real estate developers, builders, contractors, okay, people in construction. All of a sudden, they're giving away houses, giving away cars. Okay. So, you know,
Wow.
now, you pick up the newspaper today, you read about Jeffrey Epstein, right? Everybody, his client list is sealed. Judge seals the Epstein client list. Why? Because there's a lot of powerful people involved, right? With Jeffrey Epstein. And they didn't want to get out. Well, Jeffrey Epstein is kind of like, I think, a microcosm of the bigger picture. So basically, you have a lot of powerful people in the world. Okay. They like to have sex with younger, Epstein's girls were 15, 16, 13, whatever. Same with the girls at Second Mile, 15, 16, 13. Okay. There's probably powerful people who want to have sex with young kids like that. Okay. Judges, prosecutors, whoever,
Wow.
senators, politicians.
Hmm.
And so when the Second Mile got in trouble, when Jerry got in trouble in 2011, one of the senators, Senator Jake Corman, who was on the board of the Second Mile, said they were going to try to preserve the charity after Jerry, keep it going. Okay. Right. Well, if you talk to the people who actually specialize in uh, children's programs, like they ran at the Second Mile for at-risk youth, say that Second Mile's programs were high cost, low value. Okay. Meaning they didn't do much for the kids. And then one of the programs that they had, which is to anybody who understands, like how you're supposed to deal with children, all right? The Boy Scouts, youth organizations. We always have can't have one-on-one contact between adults and a kid, unsupervised. You always had to have, like in the Boy Scouts, you had to have two leaders there to talk to one boy, because if you made an accusation, you have to be able to defend yourself. The Second Mile, they had programs, mentorship, one-on-one mentorship between adults and children. Take them to a workout room and work out with them. Okay. I mean, they broke all the rules on how to, and it's because Jerry was in charge of it. So, and then the people on the board, maybe one or two had some kind of background in youth services. For the most part, all they were fundraisers,
Hmm.
bringing in the money. And so if I had to put my finger on why the second mile was avoided, that's one. Okay. Because, you know, somebody might screw up. Okay. The word might get out what was really happening.
Wow. Ray, thank you very much for coming on and
Enjoy.
talking about this. We're just right over an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time, so I really appreciate it. Really quick before we leave, I know we were mentioning about your book. When does your book come out, and what's it titled?
Well, I haven't decided on what
Oh,
title will be. It's kind of like going to be like the untold story of the Jerry Sandusky investigation or something like that. Okay. I plan to have the manuscript done probably around Memorial Day, and then uh, we'll go to publishers. I'll have some editors and people like that look at it, and then you know, see how what the timeline is if they want to publish it, and who's going to do it. But Graham Spanier and I became pretty, well acquainted during this. And when I was at his book signing, he said, "When's your book coming out?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I should write one." So as I have time, I work on it, but I put the deadline for Memorial Day to get the manuscript done. So, and like I said, I have, these volumes behind me, 700 blog posts, numerous other reports I've written. So it's more or less compile this stuff together into, into a book. Add some details I didn't have, do a couple more interviews, and then see what happens.
nice. I'm yeah, like I know I had messaged you before and said I definitely will be purchasing the book. Looking forward to it. Um, for people who want to connect with you, I know you're on Twitter. Are you anywhere else that people can kind of get in touch with you?
Uh, no, probably Twitter is the best. I'm not real big on social media these days, but
Hmm.
at Ray Blehar, that's where I'm at. And yeah, I used to be pretty active blogging, but with the information that's slowed down, really not a lot of new stuff coming out.
Hmm.
I don't do much on the blog anymore. I guess uh, if something would happen, I might get back active blogging again, maybe around the time the book comes out. Anyway, that's kind of what's going on. Thanks for having me. If you want to have me back to discuss some other aspect of the case, most people only know that 2001 incident, the most famous one. But I mean, there's the janitor incident is even more crazy, you know, in terms of not having any real evidence that actually occurred. I mean, in my opinion, that's made from whole cloth. You know, that never happened. They just fabricated that in the Attorney General's office one afternoon. So, uh, and one of the last things I'll review is he wrote this presentment that was caused this firestorm. And after they got done writing it, they realized, oh my God, we put all this onus on Penn State, but we don't have any crimes. We only have one crime happening after 2001. Okay. So like if these guys are responsible for all these kids being abused, where are all the victims? There aren't any. Like, we had this kid in the shower, then nobody for 5 years. How
Hmm.
can that be? You know, so,
Yeah. Oh wow.
Jerry took a sabbatical from being a pedophile from 2001 to 2005. You know,
Yeah. Right again. Thank you so much for doing this, and definitely I would love to have you back on to discuss more about this case, and hopefully next time have you on when your book
yeah,
is published.
Well, let me know when the podcast is out or how this works. I'll put it out on my Twitter, maybe with some of my followers. Put it on Facebook. Let you,
Absolutely.
yeah, give you some promotion.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And I'll include links to I'll include your Twitter, your link to the blog as well in the episode description for people to check it out.
Well, it's not psu.blogspot.com.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, everybody check it out. Thank you very much, Ray, again. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care, everybody.